Last day we studied till action research. Let's see further. Table 2.2 Classification of research on the basis of application. Fundamental research, applied research, addition to knowledge, solution to existing problems, discovery or invention, innovation or application, mostly academic, practical use in solving a problem, extensive in nature, intensive in nature. Classification of research on the basis of logic. In research, conclusions are based on two approaches known as the deduction and the induction. Deductive approach, it is also termed as top-down or general to specific approach. In deduction, we start from a theory and try to prove it right with the help of available information. The deductive method involves the following three steps. 1. State the hypothesis based on theory or receptor, reject the hypothesis. Example 1. All men are mortal, general fact, applies to all men. 2. Socrates is a man. 3. Therefore, Socrates is mortal, specific. Inductive approach, it is also termed as bottom-up approach. In inductive research, we move from specific to general. This approach also involves three steps. 1. Observe the different phenomena in the world. 2. Make a search for a pattern in what is observed. 3. Make a generalization about what is occurring. Example 1. Socrates is mortal, specific. 2. Alexander is mortal, specific. Pluto is mortal, and so on, specific. 3. All men are mortal, general. Take another example. Alexander is mortal, specific. Pluto is mortal, and so on, specific. 3. All men are mortal, general. Take another example. 3 plus 5 equals 8 and 8 is an even number. 7 plus 59 equals 66 and the result is again an even number. Therefore, the conclusion is when an odd number is added to another odd number, the result will be an even number. Induction, deduction, observations and facts, explanation and predictions, generalization, laws and theories. Figure 2.1 Induction and deduction. Figure 2.1 above shows the main components that form a part of inductive and deductive approach. Classification of research on the basis of inquiry mode. Basically, the process adopted to find answers to research questions involves two approaches: structured quantitative research. 2. Everything that forms the research process, such as objectives, design, sample, and the questions that a researcher plans to ask of respondents, is predetermined. 3. It is more appropriate to determine the extent of a problem, issue, or phenomenon by quantifying the variation. For example, how many people have a particular problem? How many people hold a particular attitude? Unstructured approach. 1. The unstructured approach to inquiry is usually classified as qualitative research. 2. It allows flexibility in all aspects of the research process. 3. It is more appropriate to explore the nature of a problem, issue, or phenomenon without quantifying it. Classification of research on aspects of the research process. 3. It is more appropriate to explore the nature of a problem, issue, or phenomenon without quantifying it. Classification of research on the basis of process. Quantitative research, it is similar to deductive research. It is also termed as linear research as it typically follows a linear path. 1. Stating with testable hypothesis. 2. Collection of data. 3. Analyzing the data. 4. Accepting or rejecting the hypothesis. Quantitative research is generally associated with the positivist or post-positivist paradigm. It usually involves collecting and converting data into numerical form so that statistical calculations can be made and conclusions can be drawn. Qualitative research is basically inductive or spiral in nature and has a very different structure. The researcher starts with a tentative idea or question. These questions become more specific with progress in research. Then, a pattern may emerge in research. Thus, in qualitative research, one starts with observation and ends with a theoretical position or stance. Thus, it is inductive in nature, that is, the research moves from specific to theory. Qualitative research is appropriate when 1. The intended research area is not well studied or understood. 2. A subject needs to be studied in depth. 3. A holistic perspective is needed. 4. Behavioral aspects of people need to be studied. 5. Measurement techniques like questionnaires are not considered suitable. 6. A research is needed. 4. Behavioral aspects of people need to be studied. 5. Measurement techniques like questionnaires are not considered suitable. 6. A researcher is more interested in the process, how it works, and not the product, the outcome. The important methods and approaches used in qualitative research have been discussed below. 1. Focus groups. In this method, a researcher brings together a small number of subjects to discuss the topic of interest. The group size is kept deliberately small so that the members express themselves more openly and also get more time as well. 2. Direct observation. The data are collected by an external observer. 3. In-depth interviews. It is unstructured and has face-to-face interviews. It is contrasted with a systematic review. It tends to be less focused than a systematic review and seeks to arrive at a critical interpretation of the literature that it covers. 5. Phenomenology. It is a form of qualitative research in which the researcher attempts to understand how one or more individuals experience a phenomenon. For example, interviewing the wives of 10 prisoners of war and asking them to describe their experiences. 6. Ethnography. It is the process of studying and describing a culture. A culture is the shared attitudes, values, norms, practices, language, and material things of a group of people. It intends to provide an insider's picture of a community under study. A researcher may go and live in that specific community and study the culture and their educational practices. No more cases. For example, case study of a class that was given a new curriculum of IT. 8. Grounded theory. It is a qualitative approach to generate and develop a theory from data that the researcher collects. Role play, simulation, and diary methods are also used in qualitative research. In qualitative field study, the depth of study is greater and the sample size is usually small, whereas in field survey, there is greater coverage of population but the depth of study may not be great. Mixed research. Both quantitative and qualitative researches are not exclusive. Qualitative research may end in a hypothesis that can be quantitatively tested later. Quantitative research may involve qualitative research elements. Quantitative research may answer hypotheses that can be quantitatively tested later. Quantitative research may involve qualitative research elements. Quantitative research may answer questions such as extent and pattern of poverty in India, but it may not be efficient in answering questions such as what is the experience of facing poverty, hardships, consequences, and circumstances that lead to poverty. This may be answered by qualitative research. As quantitative research is generally well known, it may be useful to outline when qualitative research is needed. Triangulation. There are multiple realities in social research. It is akin to solving a research problem in multiple ways so as to increase the validity of answer. The triangulation is mostly used in the qualitative research. It also overcomes the problem of subjectivity. It involves the use of multiple data sources, multiple investigators, and most importantly, multiple methods, such as participant observation, focus groups, case studies, and so on, to get complete understanding of the social phenomena. This provides validity to research process and also overcomes the problem of subjectivity and biasedness to an extent. It is multiple validations of results. The use of results from one set of data to corroborate those from another type of data is also known as triangulation. Classification of research on the basis of concept. Conceptual research. Conceptual research is generally used by philosophers and thinkers to develop new concepts or to reinterpret. Classification of research on the basis of concept. Conceptual research. Conceptual research is generally used by philosophers and thinkers to develop new concepts or to reinterpret the existing concepts. It is related to some abstract idea or theory. Empirical research. Empirical research relies on experience or observation alone, which is without due regards for system and theory. It is a data-based research coming up with conclusions that are capable of being verified by observation or experiment. In this research, the researcher must formulate a working hypothesis. He collects data to prove or disprove his hypothesis. The researcher is in control over the facts. Empirical research is appropriate when proof is sought that certain variables affect other variables in one area. 1. It is conducted within a framework of a set of approaches. It may be qualitative or quantitative and depends upon academic discipline. 2. The logical sequencing of steps undertaken in order to find the answers to the research questions are termed as research methodology. It adopts procedures, methods, and techniques that are tested for their validity and reliability. 3. It is unbiased and objective. According to the definition given by Creswell, research consists of 3 basic steps. 1. Formulating a research question or posing a problem, to which the researcher wants to find answers to. 2. Collecting data to answer the questions. 3. Present an answer to the question 3 and discussed in detail in ensuing paragraphs. Step 1. Formulation of the research problem. The manner in which a problem is formulated determines almost every step that follows. Steps in formulation of a research problem. Step 1. Identifying a broad area of interest. What really interests me as a professional? As a teacher, I might be interested in the area of teaching methodology or increasing acts of violence among students, psychology, or existence of common conditions of the students in an area. Step 2. Dividing broad areas into sub-areas. Suppose I want to study acts of violence among students. It can have various sub-areas. 1. Profile of families these students come from, and so on. Step 3. Focusing on and selecting an area of interest. The researcher may choose one or two areas for current research because it is not possible to pick many areas simultaneously. Delete the sub-areas in which you as a researcher do not have any interest and subsequently focus on the area you are passionate about. Step 4. Identifying the gaps and raising research questions. Within an area, list all the questions the researcher wants to find answers to. Step 5. Formulation of broad objectives. Objectives grow out of the questions. Step 6. Assessing and reviewing objectives. As a researcher narrows the research problem, the specific identification of study population is crucial in order to select the appropriate respondents. Main considerations. As a researcher narrows the research problem, the specific identification of study population is crucial in order to select the appropriate respondents. Main considerations in selecting a research problem. These help ensure that your study remains manageable and that you remain motivated. 1. Interest. Research is usually time-consuming and entails the use of resources. Many unforeseen problems may crop up, so the topic should be of interest to the researcher to sustain the desired motivation level. 2. Manageable magnitude. The topic should be manageable within the available time and resources. The broader topic should be broken down to something that is more relevant for the purpose and manageable. It should be specific and clear to the extent possible, available time and resources. The broader topic should be broken down to something that is more relevant for the purpose and manageable. It should be specific and clear to the extent possible. 3. Concept measurement. The clarity about indicators and measurement of concepts is required. The idea of construct is important here. 4. Level of expertise. The adequate level of skills for the task is required. 5. Relevance. Though relevance is again a subjective term, the research should add to the existing stock of knowledge and bridge the current knowledge gaps. 6. Availability of data. The availability of data of sources is to be ensured before finalizing the topic. 7. Ethical issues. The ethical issues and their remedies must be a research process. It makes significant contribution to each and every operational step at a later stage. After passing through this stage, a researcher is able to acquaint oneself with the available body of knowledge in the area of interest. The main objectives of literature review are as follows. 1. It broadens the knowledge of researcher about the research problem. 2. It brings better clarity and focus to the research problem. It also helps to improve the authenticity of research. 3. It helps to improve the research methodology. 4. It helps to contextualize the findings. It means how value addition has been done by the researcher to the existing stock of knowledge. The procedure for reviewing literature covers searching the existing literature. It means how value addition has been done by the researcher to the existing stock of knowledge. The procedure for reviewing literature covers searching the existing literature, reviewing it, and developing a theoretical and conceptual framework. The main sources of literature review are books and journals. In both cases, specifically in journals, there can be a gap of 2 to 3 years between the completion of a research project and the publication in a journal. As with books, the researcher needs to prepare a list of journals for identifying the literatures relevant to his research. Nowadays, researchers make extensive use of the internet sources for literature survey and review, and at the same time, the researcher should be careful about the authenticity of the contents. Bibliography can be written under 2 headings. 1. Main objectives or aims. 2. Sub-objectives. The main objective is an overall statement of the thrust of study. It is also a statement of the main associations and relationships that you seek to discover or establish. The sub-objectives are the specific aspects of the topic that you want to investigate within the main framework of your study. 1. They should be listed numerically. 2. The wording should be clear, complete, and specific. 3. Each objective should contain only one aspect of the study. 4. Use action-oriented words or verbs when writing objectives. Example of main objective and sub-objectives. Main objective. The main objective is to explore the objectives. Example of main objective and sub-objectives. Main objective. The main objective is to explore the relationship between the use of modern teaching techniques in student performance. Sub-objectives. The sub-objectives are as follows. 1. To find out the extent of relationship between the use of modern teaching techniques in student performance. 2. To compare the use of modern teaching techniques in government and private schools. 3. To study the impact of modern teaching and level of motivation of students to learn. Concepts and variables. The meanings of terms such as teaching effectiveness, class performance, job satisfaction may vary from one person to another, from one place to another. Concepts, also called as constructs, are meant that they are understood in the same sense by respondents in case we collect data. Again, for research purpose, concepts have to be made measurable. Otherwise, how the data can be collected? It means that concepts should be capable of assuming different values. Here the term indicators and variables come into picture. Anything capable of assuming different values is called as variable. Let's take another example. If richness is a concept or construct, then assets and income are its indicators. Asset values and annual incomes are variables. Types of variables. The variables are classified into categorical and quantitative variables. Quantitative variables vary in degree or amount such as annual income, and categorical variables vary in type or kind such as gender. Quantitative variables vary in degree or amount such as annual income, and categorical variables vary in type or kind such as gender. On the basis of causation, the variables are basically of two types, namely independent and dependent variables. 1. Independent variables, symbolized by IV, are presumed to be the cause of another variable. 2. Dependent variables, symbolized by DV, are the presumed effect or outcome. Dependent variables are influenced by one or more independent variables. In research, for example, in the study about impact of coaching on student performance, coaching is IV and student performance is DV. In addition, there can be intervening variables and extraneous variable. In the study about impact of coaching on student performance, coaching is IV and student performance is DV. In addition, there can be intervening variables and extraneous variables. 1. Intervening variables. These are also termed as mediator variables. They establish link between IV and DV. These are variables through which one variable affects another variable. These are helpful to understand the process. For example, tissue damage is an intervening variable in smoking and lung cancer relationship. We can use arrows, which mean causes or effects, and draw the relationship that includes an intervening variable like the one given below. Smoking tissue damage lung cancer 2. Extraneous variable. In real-life situations, there can be many factors or variables that independent variable in explaining the outcome. If an extraneous variable is the real reason for an outcome rather than IV. It is also called as confounding variable because it has confused or confounded the relationship we are interested in. The independent variable, also known as the manipulated, experimental, or treatment variable, is the variable manipulated by the researcher in an experiment. The dependent variable, also known as the outcome or response variable, is the variable that changes as a result of changes made with the independent variable. Extraneous variables also affect the dependent variable, although these are not manipulated by the researcher. On the basis of study design, the variables can be active variables and attribute variables. Active variables can be controlled, or manipulated. On the basis of unit of measurement, the variables can be categorical or continuous. Categorical are measured on nominal or ordinal scale, and they can be further classified as follows. 1. Constant variable, only one value such as flower, tree, etc. 2. Dichotomous variable, two categories such as male and female, rich and poor, etc. 3. Polytomous variable, more than two categories such as below average, average, above average, etc. Measuring variables. Measurement of variables is central to research studies. According to Stevens, measurement scales can be of four types. 1. Nominal scale. It is also termed as classificatory scale. A variable being measured on a nominal scale into two subcategories, male and female. 2. Ordinal or ranking scale. It usually ranks the subgroups in a certain sequence or order. For example, examination marks can be measured either quantitatively, that is, in absolute terms, or in percentage terms, or qualitatively using subcategories like above average, average, and below average. The distance between these subcategories may or may not be equal. The socioeconomic status can be categorized as lower class, middle class, and higher class. The middle class can further be divided into lower middle, middle, and higher middle. The attitudinal or Likert scale also falls in the same category. 3. Interval scale. An interval scale has all the middle, and higher middle. The attitudinal or Likert scale also falls in the same category. 3. Interval scale. An interval scale has all the characteristics of an ordinal scale. In addition, it uses a unit of measurement with an arbitrary starting and terminating points. For example, Celsius scale is from 0 degrees Celsius to 100 degrees Celsius. 4. Ratio scale. They are used to gather quantitative information. It combines the properties of nominal, ordinal, and interval scales. In addition, it has its own property. It has a fixed starting point. Ratio scale consists of equidistant points and has a meaningful 0 point. If we ask respondents about their ages, the difference between any 2 years would always be the consist of equidistant points and has a meaningful 0 point. If we ask respondents about their ages, the difference between any 2 years would always be the same. And 0 signifies the absence of age or birth. A 20-year-old person is twice the age of 10-year-old ones. In order to respect the notion of equal distance between adjacent points on the scale, you must make each category of the same size. Therefore, if the first category is 0 to 9999, then the second category is to be 10,000 to 19,999, and so on. There should be no overlapping of categories, and they should follow a logical order in increasing order. Attitude-ended or close-ended. If the questionnaire is open-ended, it may invite respondents from sample to describe the attitude they hold towards teaching quality. If the researcher has framed close-ended questions, the respondent is given options such as strongly agree, SA, agree, A, undecided, U, disagree, D, strongly disagree, SD. Types of attitudinal scale. As the attitudinal scales are very important in qualitative research, the different types of attitudinal scales are as follows. 1. Likert scale. It is also termed as Summit rating scale. It is the easiest one to construct. It is based upon the assumption that each statement or item on the scale has equal attitudinal value, importance. Oh wait, the quality easiest one to construct. It is based upon the assumption that each statement or item on the scale has equal attitudinal value, importance. Oh wait, the quality of a teacher may have many dimensions like use of knowledge base, communication skills, presentation of contents, organization of material, promptness to solve student problems, etc. Respondents may have different attitudes towards different aspects. Some statements may be positive, some negative, and some neutral. Then, the scores may be assigned to different responses, and the score of each respondent is calculated. Some respondents may have more positive attitude than others. There can be numerical scale as well. Instead of SAR, A, the score of each respondent is calculated. Some respondents may have more positive attitude than others. There can be numerical scale as well. Instead of SAR, A, U, D, and SD. It will have values 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. 2. Thurstone scale. It may assign weightages to the different statements, such as willing to solve student problem may have a weight of 1. The statement about subject knowledge has weight of 1.5, and statement in context of teaching skill can have weight of 2, and the scores are calculated accordingly. 3. Gutman scale. It is mainly based on ratio scale. It is quite difficult to develop. Factor analysis. Factor analysis allows researchers to describe we do not know the exact truth but have a hunch about the outcome and thus, we make some prediction about the outcome. This hunch or prediction about the outcome is called hypothesis. It can also be termed as an educated guess or assumption about some phenomenon. This assumption is tested by collecting information that will enable us to conclude if our hunch was right. Thus, defining hypothesis has the following features. 1. It is a tentative proposition. 2. The validity of a hypothesis is unknown. 3. In most cases, formulating a hypothesis specifies the logical relationship between two variables. 4. It must be generalizable. 5. It should be simple. Main functions of a hypothesis. Formulating a hypothesis, though important, is not. It must be generalizable. 5. It should be simple. Main functions of a hypothesis. Formulating a hypothesis, though important, is not absolutely necessary for a research. A perfectly valid research can be conducted even without formulating any hypothesis. In general, formulation performs the following functions. 1. They bring focus, clarity, and specificity in the research study. 2. It helps in making sample design. 3. They make the study more objective. 4. They facilitate the formulation of a theory. Hypothesis can be of the following types. 1. Descriptive hypothesis. It is formulated to describe characteristics. For example, the present indicate the relationship between two variables. For example, parents residing in urban areas spend more money on the education of their children. 3. Explanatory hypothesis. They guide about the cause and effect relationship between two variables. For example, when salaries increase, the spending on food items also increase. However, reverse may not be true. In statistical hypothesis testing, you have a null hypothesis against which you are testing an alternative. The hypothesis concerns one or more characteristics of the distribution. Concept of null and alternative hypotheses. Prof. R.A. Fisher was the first to use such an experiment for testing hypothesis by scientific investigation. He talked about the principle of replication, randomization, and Prof. R.A. Fisher was the first to use such an experiment for testing hypothesis by scientific investigation. He talked about the principle of replication, randomization, and local control in research. Observations that run contrary to those predicted are taken as evidence against the hypothesis, Observations that are in agreement with those predicted are taken as corroborating the hypothesis. It is the same as we solve everyday problems, but there is only a small twist that is termed as null and alternate hypothesis. As discussed, a hypothesis is a statement that relates two or more constructs. For example, the greater the stress experienced in a job, the lower the job satisfaction of employees. Here, you need a clear operational definition of stress and job satisfaction. A good greater the stress experienced in a job, the lower the job satisfaction of employees. Here, you need a clear operational definition of stress and job satisfaction. A good hypothesis is tested by the research that you propose to do. In classical hypothesis testing, a statement about the population parameter and then a random sample from the population are taken, and the hypothesis are tested with the appropriate sample statistics. Suppose, as a teacher you are under the impression that a high dropout rate exists among students from rural background or semi-urban areas. Then, we collect data from all the students or some of them to check the validity of the assumption or prediction. Null hypothesis, will state that place of residence, rural, urban, semi among students from rural areas. Then, data are collected to challenge the null hypothesis. If null hypothesis is rejected based on the data analysis, the alternative hypothesis will be automatically accepted. Hypothesis can also become the basis of further inquiry. Its formulation is based upon your own or someone else's observation. Directional and non-directional hypothesis. In studies relating to the academic performance of boys and girls, the null hypothesis would state that boys and girls have equal performance level. The directional hypothesis may state that boys or girls are more able. It tends to be more specific about the outcome. The non-directional alternative would simply state that there is a gender difference. Pairing research design and study design. Now, when the setting up of hypothesis is done, the next step is research design. It is a roadmap to carry out the research. It is a step-by-step approach addressing basic questions like, what is the scope of research study? What type of data is to be collected? Or something like, what methods should be used to collect the data and to analyze them? The justification is required at every step as the resources are at stake. In fact, many of the research methods are basically research designs or closely linked with them. Research design is an activity and time-based plan keeping in view of the research objectives. It guides about the types of information to be collected and their sources. It is a framework for an intensive study of a small sample more effective than a less intensive study of a large sample. And, should the analysis be primarily qualitative or quantitative? Research design is also defined as plan, structure, and strategy of investigation conceived so as to obtain answers to research questions and to control variance. It is a master plan specifying the methods and procedures for collecting and analyzing the needed information. Ghori, 1995, tried to establish a link between research design and problem structure as shown in Figure 2.2. Therefore, research design involves consideration of the following. 1. Objectives of research study. 2. Selection of method of data collection. 3. Source of info. Therefore, research design involves consideration of the following. 1. Objectives of research study. 2. Selection of method of data collection. 3. Source of information, sample design. 4. Tools for data collection. 5. Data analysis, qualitative and quantitative. Research design achieves the following purposes. 1. It makes research efficient. 2. Optimum utilization of resources, maximum information with minimal expenditure, time, and money. 3. Flexibility. 4. Minimization of bias. 5. Reliability and objectivity. Study design on the basis of number of contacts. On the basis of contacts, data are not necessarily gathered simultaneously, and data collection may spread over a period of time such as 1 week, 1 month, or so. It may also take a longer period. For example, data may be collected about holiday preference of software professionals in India. In longitudinal studies, data would be collected at several points of time. For example, a drug has been administered to a group of patients to check the efficacy of drug. And the data may have to be collected many times to check their health conditions. HR department of an organization may collect data about employee satisfaction level before and after raise of pay or promotion. The marketer may be interested in getting information about the impact of advertisement on level before and after raise of pay or promotion. The marketer may be interested in getting information about the impact of advertisement on sales. Study design on the basis of reference period. 1. Retrospective study design. It is meant for a phenomenon or a situation that has occurred in the past. 2. Prospective study design. It pertains to likely prevalence of a phenomenon in the future. Study design based on reference period can be a combination of both retrospective and prospective studies. Study design on the basis of nature of investigation. For example, a pharmaceutical company wants to test the impact of a drug in treating people. There is cause and effect relationship between the two variables. The research can be broadly classified. A pharmaceutical company wants to test the impact of a drug in treating people. There is cause and effect relationship between the two variables. The research can be broadly classified into two for the purpose of study design, namely experimental study and non-experimental study. Experimental study: if a study is done in a manner that we start from cause to establish the effects. The independent variable can be manipulated by the researcher so as to see the effect of change in independent variable, cause, on dependent variable, effect. The treatment groups, not in terms of medical science, are of two types: experimental group and control group. Who wants to investigate the effect of various factors one at a time in that experiment. Randomization: it covers the following aspects. 1. The selection of a group as experimental or control group is random. 2. All participants have equal chance of being chosen for experimental group or control group. 3. The larger the number of participants, the greater the chance that groups will represent the population. Non-experimental study: it is a retrospective type of study. Thus, we start from the effects to trace the cause. Here, the assumed cause has already occurred. Variables are still referred to as IV and DV, e.g., comparing opinions from natural groups. There can be other types of study designs as well. A few important study designs are as follows. 1. e.g., comparing opinions from natural groups. There can be other types of study designs as well. A few important study designs are as follows. 1. Action research: it is a research initiated to solve an immediate problem. It was coined by Kurt Lewin. The aim of fundamental research is the development of theory, and that of applied research is on its general application. Whereas the action research is focused on immediate application of theory. For example, the objective of action research by the teacher will be to identify the problems and then to improve classroom practices himself. 2. Cohort studies. It is based on the existence of some common characteristics such as year of birth, graduation, or marriage. For example, the researcher wants to study the pattern of employment based on the existence of some common characteristics such as year of birth, graduation, or marriage. For example, the researcher wants to study the pattern of employment of MBAs passed in 1991. When India was facing economic crisis, or study of people born between 1995 and 2000. 3. Placebo design. A patient, for example, may have an impression that he is undergoing treatment, but in reality, he is being given only sugar pills. It can play an important role in his recovery. There can be two groups, one receiving the actual treatment and the second receiving placebo treatment. The control group can also be used in this design. The first group receives the actual treatment, the second placebo treatment, and the third group, control group, received as the information recorded to represent facts. Few points about data are worth mentioning here. 1. Data represent facts about hypothesized variables. 2. Data are analyzed to determine consistency with prediction. Prediction is in the form of setting up of hypothesis. 3. If data and prediction are consistent, then null hypothesis is supported. 4. If data and prediction are inconsistent, hypothesis is not supported and is rejected. The quality and validity of the output are solely dependent on the tools used for data collection. The data can be classified as primary and secondary, objective and subjective, and qualitative and quantitative. Classified as primary and secondary, objective and subjective, and qualitative and quantitative. Primary data and secondary data. Primary data are collected for the purpose of current research project, whereas secondary data are collected for some other research purpose. It is collected fresh by the researcher and is based on surveys, observations, and experimentation. It is expensive and difficult to acquire. It is reliable as it has been obtained directly with a specific problem in view. Figure 2.3 shows the various ways by which primary data can be collected. Figure 2.3 sources for collection of primary data be collected. Figure 2.3 sources for collection of primary data. Secondary data are collected from external sources such as TV, radio, the internet, magazines, books, and newspapers. These data might have been collected for different purposes. It is an inexpensive and a quick method of obtaining information. Sometimes, it is the only way when the original source is inaccessible. It should be ascertained, whether the data is relevant to your study, And E. Is it credible? Objective data and subjective data. Objective data are independent of any single person's opinion, whereas subjective data can be an individual's opinion or it can be dependent upon the researcher. Qualitative data and quantitative data. Qualitative data, and with proper sampling design, the ability to generalize is also high. Observation method. This is used in behavioral sciences. It is about collecting primary data by investigators' own direct observation of relevant people, actions, and situations without asking from the respondent. For example, a retail chain sends observers posing as customers into competitors' stores to check on cleanliness and customer service. Observation can yield information which people are normally not willing or able to provide. For example, by observing many copies of classwork, the untidy copies indicate that quality of teaching is not satisfactory. Types of observations. 1. Structured for descriptive research. 2. Unstructured for exploratory research. 3. Participant observation. Satisfactory. Types of observations. 1. Structured for descriptive research. 2. Unstructured for exploratory research. 3. Participant observation. 4. Non-participant observation. 5. Disguised observation. Limitations. Firstly, there are many behavioral aspects that may not be observable directly. For example, marketer as a researcher cannot measure the feelings, beliefs, and attitudes that motivate buying behavior, and infrequent behavior cannot be observed. Secondly, the observation method is quite expensive. Survey method. Sometimes, observation method is supplemented with survey method. This approach is most suited for gathering descriptive information. And this research may be direct or indirect. Use formal lists of questions to be asked from all respondents in the same manner. 2. Unstructured surveys. They give the interviewer the flexibility to probe respondents and direct the interview according to their answers. Advantages. 1. Quick and low cost in comparison to observation method. 2. Survey method can be administered to collect many different types of information. Limitations. 1. Privacy issues. 2. Reluctance on the part of respondents. 3. Biases. Contact methods. Information may be collected by mails, telephone, personal interview, etc. Mail questionnaires. Advantages. 1. It includes collecting large amounts of information at a low cost per respondent. 2. Respondents may give more. Mail questionnaires. Advantages. 1. It includes collecting large amounts of information at a low cost per respondent. 2. Respondents may give more honest answers to personal questions on a mail questionnaire. 3. It is unbiased as no interviewer is involved. 4. Convenient for respondents who can answer when they have time. 5. Good way to reach people who travel. Limitations. 1. It is not flexible. 2. It takes a longer time to complete than telephonic or personal interviews. 3. It has low response rate. 4. Little control of researcher over the process. Telephonic interviewing. Advantages. 1. It is a quick method. 2. It gives greater flexibility to interviewer as he can explain questions not understood properly by the respondent. 3. Per respondent as interviewer should be more skilled. 2. Privacy issues. 3. Complete standardization is not possible. 4. Wrong entry is possible due to lack of time. Personal interviewing. It is very flexible and can be used to collect large amounts of information. Trained interviewers can hold the respondent's attention and are available to clarify difficult questions. They can guide interviews, explore issues, and probe as the situation requires. Personal interviews can be used in any type of questionnaire and can be conducted fairly quickly. Interviewers can also show actual products, advertisements, or packages, and observe and record their reactions and behavior. This takes two forms. Interviewers can also show actual products, advertisements, or packages, and observe and record their reactions and behavior. This takes two forms, namely intercept interviewing, for individuals, and focus group interviewing, for groups. Intercept interviewing. Advantages. 1. It is widely used in marketing research such as tourism. 2. It allows the researcher to reach known people in a short period of time. 3. It is the only method of reaching people whose names and addresses are unknown. 4. It involves talking to people at homes, offices, on the street, or in shopping malls. 5. The interviewer must gain the interviewee's cooperation. 6. It is time-consuming and may range from a few minutes to several hours for longer surveys. Compensation may be offered from a few minutes to several hours for longer surveys. Compensation may be offered. 7. It involves the use of judgmental sampling, that is, the interviewer has guidelines as to whom to intercept, such as 25% under 20 years of age and 75% over 60 years of age. Limitations. 1. There is greater room for error and bias on the part of the interviewer who may not be able to correctly judge age, race, etc. 2. Interviewer may not be comfortable talking to certain ethnic or age groups. Focus group interviewing advantages. 1. It is usually conducted by inviting 6 to 10 people to gather for a few hours with a trained moderator to talk about a product, service, or organization. The meeting is held in a pleasant place. And at the same time, the interviewer focuses on the discussion, hence the name focus group interviewing. 4. It is often held to help determine the subject areas on which questions should be asked in a later, large-scale, structured, direct interview. 5. Comments are recorded through note-taking or videotaped and studied later. Content analysis. Limitations. 1. It is more expensive than telephonic survey. 2. Group interview studies keep the sample size small enough to keep time and cost down. Therefore, it may be difficult to generalize from the results. 3. There is some possibility of interviewer bias. Construction of a research tool. Questionnaire. Questionnaire depends upon research objectives. There is some possibility of interviewer bias. Construction of a research tool. Questionnaire. Questionnaire depends upon research objectives. For each objective or research questions, list all the associated questions that a researcher wants to answer through study. Then, the information required to answer them is listed, and finally, the questions are listed. Questionnaire concept and types. A questionnaire consists of a set of questions presented to a respondent for answers. The questionnaire is used during structured surveys or interviews. The respondents read the questions, interpret what is expected, and then write down the answers themselves. It is also called an interview schedule when the researcher asks the questions and records the respondent's reply on respondents. There are many options before the researchers adopt this method. But questionnaires should be developed and tested carefully before being administered on a large scale. There are 3 basic types of questionnaires: closed-ended, open-ended, and a combination of both. 1. Closed-ended questionnaire. Closed-ended questionnaires generally include multiple-choice questions or scale questions. This type of questionnaire can be administered to a large number of respondents or sample size. As there is a set format, the data generated from questionnaire can be easily fed into a computer system for the purpose of analysis. 2. Open-ended questionnaire. Open-ended questionnaires offer the flexibility to respondents to answer in their own words. It may leave a blank section to write an answer. Open-ended questionnaire. Open-ended questionnaires offer the flexibility to respondents to answer in their own words. It may leave a blank section to write an answer. Closed-ended questionnaires might be used to find out how many people use metro rail service in New Delhi. But open-ended questionnaires might be used to find out what people think about the quality of service. 3. Combined questionnaire. In this method, it is possible to find out how many people use a service and what they think of the service in the same form. The combined questionnaire may begin with a series of closed-ended questions, with boxes to tick or scales to rank, and then finish with a section of open-ended questions or a more detailed response. Steps-ended questions, with boxes to tick or scales to rank, and then finish with a section of open-ended questions or a more detailed response. Step 4. Selecting samples. Researchers usually draw conclusions about large groups by taking a sample. A sample as a subset of the population selected to represent the population as a whole. The main benefits of sampling are as follows. 1. Reduction in overall cost of research. Each person in the population has equal, independent, and known chances of being selected. In case there are 100 elements in a population, every element has 1/100th chance of being selected in a sampling exercise. Here, independence means that selection of one element is neither being affected by the selection of other elements nor it will affect the other elements. Simple random sample. Every element or member of the population has a known and equal chance of being selected. Stratified random sample. In case the population is heterogeneous, the population can be divided into different strata. The population within a stratum is homogeneous with respect to the characteristic under study. Population is divided into mutually exclusive groups such as AIDS population. Suppose there are 1000 students in a college, 600 study humanities and 400 study commerce. In a sample of 100, 60 students will be from humanities and 40 from commerce, that is, in the same ratio as in the overall population. See cluster sample. The simple and stratified sampling is adopted in situations when population size is small and units are identifiable. But if the population is larger, the researcher can go for cluster sampling. The population is divided into mutually exclusive groups, and the researcher draws a sample of the group to interview. For example, in a national level survey, at the first few levels, a few states may be selected. Within the states, multi-stage cluster sampling. 2. Non-probability sampling. It is a sampling technique where the samples are gathered in a process that does not give all the individuals in the population equal chances of being selected. Here, only some elements of the population have a greater chances or unknown chances of being selected. E. Convenience sampling. The researcher selects the easiest population members from which to obtain information. B. Judgment or purposive sampling. The researcher uses her judgment to select population members who are likely to provide accurate information. This can be used for historical research or descriptive research. C. Quota sampling. The researcher finds and interviews a prescribed number of people in each. C. Quota sampling. The researcher finds and interviews a prescribed number of people in each of several categories. Here, the main criterion used by the researcher is the ease to access sample population. The sample is selected from a location convenient to him or her. Here, there are some possibilities to include people with some visible characteristics. However, the results may not be generalized to larger populations. D. Accidental sampling. It is akin to quota sampling, but used in market research, in marketplaces, where a researcher can come across any person and they may not have any information. 8. Snowball sampling. In this kind of sampling, the information may be selected from few individuals, and they may identify other people for the purpose of gathering information. Ball sampling. In this kind of sampling, the information may be selected from few individuals, and they may identify other people for the purpose of gathering information. They may also become a part of the sample. It creates a network of sample elements. Determining sample design. Designing the sample calls for 3 decisions. 1. Sample itself, who will be surveyed? It further depends upon what type of information is required. 2. Sample size, how many people should ideally be surveyed? Large samples are likely to give more reliable results than small samples. However, it has to be a trade-off between cost and accuracy. 3. Sampling, how should the sample be chosen? Sampling can be done by adopting either probability. Research study depends upon 4 petaseconds. 1. Purpose, the required precision of study. 2. Population, the size and nature of population under study. 3. Procedure, the time, budget, and resources available. 4. Publishing, the importance of the study's note. The more heterogeneous or diverse the population is, the bigger should be the sample size. Step 5. Writing a research proposal. A research proposal is a document of usually 3 to 7 pages that informs others of a proposed piece of research. This proposed research is usually a master's or doctorate by thesis, but it can also be a work for a corporate purpose. A research proposal is a document written by a researcher that provides a detailed description of the proposed program. It is like an outline written by a researcher that provides a detailed description of the proposed program. It is like an outline of the entire research process that gives the reader a summary of information discussed in the project. Research proposals are written for various reasons like budget request for the research, certification requirements for research, etc. Main elements of research proposal. 1. Need of a specific research project. 2. Benefits and beneficiaries. 3. The type of data to be collected and the means to collect the data. Step 6. Collecting data. There are many alternatives available to collect relevant data. The researcher should select one of these methods of collecting data, taking into account the data are analyzed further to test the hypothesis. In case of a survey, data can be collected by any one or more of the following ways. 1. By observation. This entails the collection of information by the way of investigators' own observation without interviewing the respondents. The information obtained relates to the current happenings. This method is very expensive and the information gathered in such a manner is limited. This method is not suitable for research where large samples are required, as is the case with quantitative research. 2. Personal interviews. The investigator follows structured approach, and the questions are preconceived. Here, the output also depends upon the ability of the interviewer to a large extent. 3. Telephonic interviews. This method of collecting information involves contacting the respondents on telephone itself. It is used when the survey has to be accomplished in a very limited time. 4. Mailed questionnaires. Questionnaires are mailed to the respondents with a request to return after completing the same. It is the most commonly used method in economic and business surveys. A pilot study may be conducted for testing the questionnaire to check its appropriateness for the purpose. 5. Schedules. In this method, the enumerators are specially appointed and trained for gathering information. Schedules consist of relevant questions. The enumerators visit respondents with these schedules. Schedules are filled up by the enumerators on the basis of replies given by the respondents. Some randomness. The enumerators visit respondents with these schedules. Schedules are filled up by the enumerators on the basis of replies given by the respondents. Some random checking by the supervisors may be required to ensure the validity of the research process. Although he should pay attention to all these factors, but much depends upon the ability and experience of the researcher. Step 7. Processing and analyzing data. After the data have been collected, the next step is to analyze it. It requires a number of closely related operations such as establishment of categories and the application of these categories to raw data through coding, tabulation, and then drawing statistical inferences. The large data should be condensed into a few manageable groups and take off classification of data into more relevant, purposeful, and usable categories. 1. Editing. The process of cleaning the data is called editing. The purpose of editing is to identify and minimize errors, miscalculations, misclassification, or any gap in information provided by the respondent. Editing improves the quality of the data for coding. 2. Coding. It depends upon how a variable has been measured in your research instrument. For coding, the first step is to ensure the nature of data, that is, whether it is quantitative or qualitative. The qualitative data may be descriptive, case history, categorical or discrete, gender, male or female, income, below average or above average, attitude, strongly favorable, favorable or male or female, income, below average or above average, attitude, strongly favorable, favorable or unfavorable. Quantitative and categorical information is processed to be converted into numerical values called codes. It is usually done at this stage, through which the categories of data are transformed into symbols that may be tabulated and counted. After coding is completed, the data are tabulated. The descriptive information goes through a process called content analysis with a motive to get an idea about the themes of the descriptive information, such as an interview. In descriptive or qualitative data, the researcher may go through the transcription of all interviews in which people may use different words to express the same phenomenon. Data in groups or classes on the basis of common characteristics. It can be done in following ways. Classification according to attributes. The data can be descriptive, e.g., literacy, sex, religion, etc., or numerical, e.g., weight, height, income, etc. Further classification can be either simple classification or manifold classification. 1. Simple classification. In this classification, we consider only one attribute and divide the universe into two classes. One class consisting of items possessing the given attribute and the other class consisting of items which does not possess the given attribute. Example: candidates with MBA degree. 2. Manifold classification. In this classification, we consider two or more attributes simultaneously. Classification according to class intervals. Classification is done with data relating to income, age, weight, tariff, production, occupancy, etc. Such quantitative data are known as the statistics of variables and are classified on the basis of class intervals. For example, persons whose income is within (2001 and (4000) can form one group or class. Those with income within (4001 and (6000) can form another group or class, and so on. The number of items which fall in a given class is known as the frequency of the given class. Tabulation. Tabulation is a part of the technical procedure wherein the classified data are put in the form of tables. It is the process of summary used for this purpose. When data are really large, computers can be used for tabulation. It also makes it possible to study large number of variables affecting a problem simultaneously. It is an orderly arrangement of data in columns and rows. It is essential because of the following reasons. 1. It conserves space and reduces explanatory and descriptive statement to a minimum. 2. It facilitates the process of comparison. 3. It facilitates the summation of items in the detection of errors and omissions. 4. It provides the basis for various statistical computations. Tabulation may also be classified as simple and complex tabulations. Simple tabulation generally results in a one-way table. Tabulation may also be classified as simple and complex tabulations. Simple tabulation generally results in a one-way table that supplies answers to questions about one characteristic of data only. Complex tabulation usually results in two-way tables, which give information about two interrelated characteristics of data. Three-way tables or still higher order tables are also known as manifold tables. Analysis of data. After tabulation, analysis is done with the help of different mathematical and statistical techniques such as percentages, averages, coefficients of correlation, regression, and so on. It largely depends upon whether data is qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative data analysis. The analytical approach may be personalized, and there may be few rigid rules in precision, and so on. It largely depends upon whether data is qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative data analysis. The analytical approach may be personalized, and there may be few rigid rules and procedures. Generally, the researcher needs to go through a process called content analysis. Content analysis means an Content analysis means analysis of the contents of an interview in order to identify the main themes that emerge from responses given by the respondents. This process involves the following steps. 1. Identify the main themes. The researcher needs to carefully go through the descriptive responses given by respondents to each question so as to understand the meaning they communicate. These help in developing broad themes that reflect these meanings. For example, people use different words and languages to express themselves. 2. Assign codes to the main themes. Assigning codes is required when the researcher wants to count the number of times a theme has occurred in an interview. 3. Classify responses under the main themes. Having identified the themes, the next step is to go through the transcripts of all the interviews and classify the responses under different themes. 4. Integrate themes and responses into the text of your report. Text of your report. It entirely depends upon the way the researcher wants to communicate the findings to the readers. Quantitative data analysis. This method is most suitable for large, well-designed and well-administered surveys using properly constructed and worded questionnaire. Data can be analyzed either manually or with the help of a computer. 1. Manual data analysis. This can be done if the number of respondents is reasonably small and if there are not many variables to analyze. However, this is useful only for calculating frequencies and for simple cross-tabulations. Manual data analysis is time-consuming. The easiest way to do this is to code it directly onto a large graph paper in columns. 2. Data analysis is time-consuming. The easiest way to do this is to code it directly onto a large graph paper in columns. 2. Data analysis using a computer. If you want to analyze the data using computer, you should be familiar with the appropriate program. In this area, knowledge of computer and statistics plays an important role. The most common software is SPSS for Windows. However, data input can be long and laborious process, and if data are entered incorrectly, it will influence the final results. In the process of analysis, relationships or differences, supporting or conflicting with original or new hypothesis should be subjected to tests of significance to determine with what validity the data can be contrary. This is the usual question that should be answered while testing hypothesis. Various tests, such as chi-square test, t-test, and f-test, have been developed by statisticians for this purpose. The hypothesis may be tested through use of one or more such tests. Depending upon the nature and object of research inquiry, hypothesis testing will result in either accepting the hypothesis or rejecting it. If the researcher had no hypothesis to start with, generalizations established on the basis of data may be stated as hypothesis to be tested by subsequent researchers in times to come. Generalizations and interpretation. If a hypothesis is tested and upheld several times, it may be possible for the researcher to arrive at generalization, that is, to build a theory. If a hypothesis is tested and upheld several times, it may be possible for the researcher to arrive at generalization, that is, to build a theory. As a matter of fact, the real value of research lies in its ability to arrive at certain generalizations. If the researcher had no hypothesis to start with, he might seek to explain his findings on the basis of some theory. It is known as interpretation. The process of interpretation may trigger off new questions which in turn may lead to further researches. Step 8. Writing a research report. Writing a report is the last, and for many, the most difficult step of the research process. The report informs the world what you have done, what you have discovered, and what conclusions you have drawn from your findings. The report should be written in an academic of the research process. The report informs the world what you have done, what you have discovered, and what conclusions you have drawn from your findings. The report should be written in an academic style. Language should be formal and not journalistic. Research report format. Traditional written reports tend to be produced in the following format. Title page 1. Title of the research project 2. Name of the researcher 3. Purpose of the research project. For example, a research project submitted on partial fulfillment of the requirements of XYZ University, New Delhi, for the degree of blank. 4. Date of publication. Table of contents. In this section, the contents of the report, either in chapters or in subheadings, are listed. Example contents page: No. Intro, Analysis and Interpretation. Chapter 4, Summary and Conclusion. Suggestions for further research. References, bibliography. Appendices. Appendix I, Questionnaire for employees. Appendix 2, Questionnaire for managers. List of tables. This section includes the title and page numbers of all tables. Example, Table No. Title page number 1. Income levels of respondents. 2. Age distribution of respondents. List of figures. This section contains the title and page numbers of all graphs, pie charts, etc. Example, Figure No. Title page No. 1. Pie chart showing the age distribution of respondents. 2. Bar graph showing the popularity of menu items. Acknowledge Figure No. Title page No. 1. Pie chart showing the age distribution of respondents. 2. Bar graph showing the popularity of menu items. Acknowledgements in this section. The researcher may acknowledge the institute, principal, faculty guides, both research guide and technical guide, research participants, friends, etc. Introduction. This section introduces the research, setting out the main aims and objectives. It is actually a rationale for the research. Theoretical framework and review of literature. This section includes all the background research information that has been obtained from the literature review. You must indicate from where all the information was obtained. Thus, it is mandatory to keep a complete record of everything. The intellectual theft. Research design. This section includes all practical details followed for the research. After reading this, any interested party should be able to replicate the research study. It includes the methods used for data collection, sampling procedures, tools used for data collection, and analysis of data. Data analysis and interpretation. If you have conducted a large quantitative survey, this section may contain tables, graphs, pie charts, and associated statistics. If you have conducted a qualitative piece of research, this section may be a descriptive prose. Summary and conclusion. In this section, you sum up your findings and draw conclusions from them. Perhaps in relation to other research or literature. Recommend the report. Sometimes, this section is included at the beginning of the report. Suggestions for further research. Research is a continuous process. This section shows how research could be continued. This could happen as some results are inconclusive or the research itself has thrown up many more research questions that need to be addressed. It also shows the honesty and integrity of the researcher, that he has a wider perspective and has actually not tried to cover up the shortcomings. List of references, bibliography. The list of references contains only the details of those works cited in the text. It includes sources not cited in the main text matter but are relevant to the subject of study. Specifically, includes sources not cited in the main text matter but are relevant to the subject of study, specifically in case of larger dissertations or theses. Small research projects may need just a reference section to include all the literature that has been referred to in the report. For books, 1. Author's surname alphabetically, followed by their initials. 2. Date of publication. 3. Title of the book in italics. 4. Place of publication, publisher. For journal articles, the title of the article appears in inverted commas and name of the journal comes in italics, followed by the volume number and pages of the article. Example, MADAAN KVS. Influence of British rule on Indian culture. Theirs or interview schedules constructed for conducting the research. It may be useful to include them in the report as an appendix. Appendices do not count towards your total number of pages or words. It is a useful way of including relevant material so that the examiner can gain a deeper understanding of your work by reading it. Certificate certified that this research project titled blank _ blank is the bona fide record of work carried out by blank for final year blank. Technical guide research coordinator principal place blank date blank dissertation and thesis. A dissertation culminates in a postgraduate degree such as Tech, MSc, MPhil. Whereas a thesis leads to a doctoral degree, Europe and India. In American universities, a dissertation as Tech, MSc, MPhil. Whereas a thesis leads to a doctoral degree, Europe and India. In American universities, a dissertation leads to a PhD degree and a thesis leads to a master's degree. We will adhere to the former one. In a dissertation, it is adequate if one has a decent knowledge of the new discoveries in order to arrive at the conclusion effectively. In a thesis, one has to substantiate the hypothesis with original research work. The hypothesis or the synopsis should contain the gist of the new findings one has made on the subject of research. The written thesis should contain all details of original research work that one has made on the subject. A thesis may be subjected to scrutiny for any plagiarism to analysis of any existing literature is added, whereas a dissertation by itself is an analysis of any existing literature. The differences between a dissertation and a thesis are given below. 1. A researcher has to utilize the already collected information in order to prepare a dissertation, whereas thesis is based on the research conducted all by himself. 2. Thesis is lengthier, thus takes more time to be completed, whereas dissertation is short, therefore, it does not consume too much time to be completed. 3. In thesis, researcher have to include a hypothesis based on your research work. In contrast to thesis, in dissertation, researcher should have a decent knowledge of the new discoveries in order to infer conclusion effective your research work. In contrast to thesis, in dissertation, researcher should have a decent knowledge of the new discoveries in order to infer conclusion effectively. 4. In thesis, researcher has to focus on your primary argument in order to prove your standpoint to the readers. In contrast to thesis, dissertation focuses on background work. 5. In master's dissertation, researcher has to utilize the research work in order to prove his point. In case of PhD thesis, researcher has to add novel findings to the existing literature. 6. Thesis is written as an academic research paper, whereas dissertation is more like an academic book. 7. Data collected in dissertation is based upon the hypothetical analysis of contents, whereas thesis is center, UGC, of the University Grant Commission. Now, the candidates will have to store the thesis in a compact disc, CD, and upload each chapter in a separate PDF file using naming convention as prescribed by Shodhganga. The CD must be authenticated by supervisor, head of department. And FlipNet introduced Shodhgangotri, which has been built to maintain a database of synopsis of ongoing MPhil, PhD in Indian universities and institutions. Basic bibliographic information upper format. The American Psychological Association upper guidelines specify using sentence-style capitalization for the titles of books or articles, so we should capitalize only the first word of a title and subtitle. The exceptions to this rule would be periodical title style capitalization for the titles of books or articles, so we should capitalize only the first word of a title and subtitle. The exceptions to this rule would be periodical titles and proper names in a title that should be capitalized. The periodical title is run in title case and is followed by the volume number, which is italicized along with the title. If there is more than one author, use an ampersand and before the name of the last author. If there are more than 6 authors, list only the first one and use etal for the rest. Format examples 1. Books format, author's last name, first initial, publication date, book title, additional information, city of publication, publisher. First initial, publication date, book title, additional information, city of publication, publishing company. Examples MADAAN, KVS, 2009. Fundamentals of Retailing, New Delhi, Tata McGraw-Hill. 2. Encyclopedia and dictionary format, author's last name, first initial, date, title of article, title of encyclopedia, volume, pages, city of publication, publishing company. Examples Bergman, P.G., 1993. Relativity, in the New Encyclopedia Britannica, Volume 26, pp. 501-508. Chicago, Encyclopedia Britannica, 3. Magazine and newspaper articles form p. 501-508. Chicago, Encyclopedia Britannica, 3. Magazine and newspaper articles format, author's last name, first initial, publication date, article title, periodical title, volume number, issue number if available, inclusive pages. Examples Harlow, H.F., 1983. Fundamentals for Preparing Psychology Journal Articles. Journal of Comparative and Physiological Psychology, 55, 893-896. 4. Website or web page format for online periodical. Author's name, date of publication, title of article, title of periodical, volume number, retrieved month, day, year, from full URL. Format for online. Examples Debut, T. 2001, August 2nd. Lightning Injures 4 at Music Festival. The Y files, retrieved January 23, 2002. From http://yfiles.org/137lightning/index.html Dove, R. 1998. Lady Freedom Among Us. The Electronic Text Center. Retrieved June 19, 1998, from Alderman Library, University of Virginia website. http://etext.lib.virginia. edu/subjects/affirm.html main terms used in context of footnotes and reference writing. IBID is the abbreviation for the Latin ibidem, meaning the same. It refers to the used in context of footnotes and reference writing. IBID is the abbreviation for the Latin ibidem, meaning the same. It refers to the same author and source, e.g., book and journal, in the immediately preceding reference. OP, CIT, is the abbreviation for the Latin opus citatum, meaning the work cited. It refers to the reference listed earlier by the same author. Loc, CIT, is of Latin origin and abbreviation for loco citato, meaning in the place cited. It is a footnote or endnote term used to repeat the title and page number for a given work. Et al. Refers to, and others. It is used 3. It holds the researcher accountable to the public and society. 4. It helps in building public support for research, which in return can help in getting participants who take part in the research willingly. Main approaches to research ethics. The following are the 3 major approaches to ethics. 1. Deontological approach. We should identify and use a universal code in making ethical decisions. This is our absolutist approach. 2. Ethical skepticism approach. It states that ethical standards are not universal but are relative to one's own particular culture and time. This is based on relativism. 3. Utilitarianism approach. Decisions regarding ethics in research should be based on an examination and comparison of the costs and benefits that may arise from a study. If the expected benefits exceed the expected risks, the study is presumed to be ethical. The risk-benefit precaution is a modern version of the end justifying the means. It has its most direct application when those exposed to the risks also receive the benefits. The ratio is more difficult to justify when the participants are subjected to potential harm and when the benefits are directed to other individuals or to the society to be absolute in their requirements. Some desirable elements to ensure ethics in research. The following is a general summary of some research ethical guidelines and principles that various codes address. 1. Honesty in reporting data, results, methods and procedures, and publication status. 2. Objectivity to avoid bias in interpretation and peer review. 3. Integrity, acting with sincerity, striving for consistency of thought and action. 4. Carefulness to avoid careless errors and negligence, proper documentation of all aspects. 5. Openness in sharing data, results, ideas, tools, resources and openness to criticisms and new ideas. 6. Respect for intellectual property rights such as patents, copyrights, and other forms of intellectual property. 7. Confidentiality in context of communications, personal records, and privacy issues. 8. Responsible publication with an aim to serve the society, avoiding wasteful and duplicative publication. 9. Responsible mentoring in terms of guiding research students. Respect for colleagues translates to extending fair treatment to the colleagues. 11. Social responsibility means to serve the society and different stakeholders. 12. Non-discrimination against colleagues or students on the basis of sex, race, or factors that are not related to their scientific competence and integrity. 13. Enhancing competence for own professional advancement or lifelong learning, taking steps to promote competence in science as a whole. 14. Ensuring legality of the whole process by obeying relevant laws, that is, institutional and governmental policies. 15. Animal care through proper experimental designs. Stakeholders in research. There are 3 stakeholders in the research process, namely participants or subjects, researcher, and the funding organization. Ethical issues relating to participants. There are many ethical issues in relation to participants of a research activity. One of the most commonly cited ethical principles is that we should not cause harm to our research participants. The issue of ethics in research mainly caught the attention of policy makers as a result of many gruesome instances, few of which have been mentioned below. 1. Medical experiments conducted by Nazi doctors in German concentration camps in 1930s. Nazi doctors in German concentration camps killed twin gypsy teenagers in order to determine why some of them had differently colored eyes while conducting experiments. 2. A South African oncologist experimented with women's excessive dosages of chemotherapeutics without informing the patients and taking their due consents. 3. Ethical issues during organ transplant, sterilization, and so on. 4. Experiments on animals. In research, specifically in medical sciences, the observance of ethics is very crucial. Even now, when pharmaceutical companies want to conduct clinical trials in underdeveloped or developing countries, this issue crops up again and again. It is a general understanding that ethical research issues are more moral than legal. Apart from physical injury, the psychological distress or emotional harm, loss of self-esteem, being persuaded to conduct morally reprehensible acts, and hampering one's physical, intellectual, or emotional development are other important concerns. So that respondents may not be identified or otherwise harmed through loss of confidentiality. During the initial phase of medical research history, people participating in trials were referred to as research subjects. Now, they are called as trial participants. Now, their role has transformed from a passive subject to that of an active participant. Thus, we can see that research ethics are basically about means of ensuring that vulnerable people are protected from exploitation and other forms of harm. The ethical issues are to be observed at every stage of a research process. 1. Collecting information. Before a researcher actually collects information, his request for information may put pressure or create anxiety on a respondent. It may not be ethical, but pressure or create anxiety on a respondent. It may not be ethical, but without research, there will be no intellectual progress or development in the society. A researcher is required to improve the conditions by considering various points in the ensuing discussion. 2. Seeking consent of participants. Informed consent refers to an individual's willingness to participate in a study. Individuals who provide informed consent have been made aware of the design and procedures with enough detail to exercise a rational decision to participate. 3. Providing incentives. Most people do not participate in a study because of incentives, but they are motivated because of the importance of the study. Giving a gift before data collection is not ethical on the part of a researcher. 4. Seeking sensitive information. Some pieces of information can be regarded as sensitive or confidential by some people. This may be akin to invading their privacy. Seeking such kind of information may make them upset. Questions on income, age, marital status, etc. may be considered as intrusive. It, however, may not be unethical to inquire if the participants be explained before the research and give them sufficient time to decide if they want to participate without any major inducement. 5. Possibility of causing harm to the participants. When you collect data from respondents or involve subjects in an experiment, you need to examine carefully whether their involvement is likely to harm them in any way. Harm may include use of chemicals, drugs, discomfort, anxiety, harassment, and dehumanizing procedures. Even after the consent, the researcher must make sure that the risk is minimal. 6. Maintaining confidentiality. In case the researcher has to identify the respondent as information needs to be sought more than once. Sharing information about a respondent with others for purposes other than research is not ethical, and at least the information provided by the respondent should be kept anonymous. Ethical issues relating to the researcher. 1. Avoiding bias. Objectivity in research means to avoid bias in the research process as it is considered unethical. Bias means deliberate attempt to either hide facts or to underrepresent or overrepresent them. It may undermine the truth. 2. Provision or deprivation of a treatment. This is specifically true in case of medical research. Is it ethical to provide to a study population with an intervention or treatment that has not yet been conclusively proven effective? However, without administering it to patients, its real effects may never be known, and patients may be deprived of its potential benefits. Thus, it imposes an ethical dilemma before researchers. Informed consent, minimum risk, and frank discussion can help to resolve the ethical issues. 3. Using inappropriate research methodology. The deliberate use of a highly biased sample, method, or procedure is unethical. 4. Incorrect reporting. This can be done to advance the interests of the researcher. 5. Inappropriate use of the information. Sometimes it is possible to harm individuals in the process of achieving benefits for the organization. An example would be a study to help in formulation of a policy by the organization. New policy may not serve the interests of certain individuals but may be good for the organization as such. Should you ask respondents for information that is likely to be used against them? Some of the key terms used in the context of ethical issues concerning researchers are as follows. 1. Fabricating behavior, creation of spurious data by researcher, their recording and drawing inferences. 2. Falsification manipulates the research material, equipment, and processes, or changes or omits data or results such that the research is not accurately represented in the research records. 3. Plagiarize somebody else's ideas, thoughts, pictures, theories, words, or stories as your own. If a researcher plagiarizes the work of others, the integrity, ethics, and trustworthiness of the sum total of his or her research becomes questionable. Plagiarism is both an illegal and punishable act and is considered to be on the same level as stealing from the author who originally created it. It can take the following forms. Intracorpal. A case of plagiarism where one student has copied from another in the same submission is known as intracorpal plagiarism. B. Extracorpal. It is an instance of plagiarism where a student has copied the material from an external source, e.g., book, journal article, World Wide Web, etc. C. Autoplagiarism. It is citing one's own work without acknowledgement. 4. Multiple authorship. There can be many improprieties in authorship. Improper assignment of credit, such as excluding other authors. Inclusion of others as authors who have not made a definite contribution towards the work published, or submission of multi-authored publication without the knowledge of all the authors. 5. Peer review. It is the process in which an author submits a written manuscript or an article to a journal for publication. The journal editor distributes the article to experts or reviewers. The peer review process seldom proceeds in a straight line. The entire process may involve several rounds of communication between the editor, the reviewers, and the original author before an article is ready for publication. The two most important ethics in the process are maintaining confidentiality and protection of intellectual property. Reviewers and authors should not know the names of each other. Only then, the peer review process can be genuinely open and beneficial. None in the process can publicly disclose the information in the article or use the information in a submitted article for personal gain. 6. Duplicate and partial publication. It is publishing the same data and same results in more than one publication or journal. This is unethical but may be acceptable in certain cases, such as publishing results in a journal to provide research participants with a summary of the results. Partial publication involves publishing parts of your. It is specifically unethical for a small, focused study. However, in case of large studies with many variables, this may be acceptable as different publications involve different research questions and different data, and it actually advances the interest of the study. Important measures to make research more ethical. 1. Informed consent. The provision of informed consent also includes the knowledge that the informed participation is voluntary and that participants can withdraw from the study at any time. 2. Protective research design. This involves estimating the probability of happening of harmful effects, their severity, and the likely duration of these effects. 3. Screening. It is an attempt to select only those individuals for study who show a high tolerance for potential risks. 4. Pilot studies, when the potential harms are uncertain. A useful precaution involves a pilot study with follow-up diagnostic interviews to assess the effects and request advice from the participants. 5. Outside proposal review. Requesting others to review research proposals is a helpful precaution in minimizing risks. 6. Professional codes. Two features of professional codes are important for discussion. First, professional codes have been developed inductively from the wide research experiences of professionals. Second, professional codes place strong emphasis on researchers' responsibility for their research. 7. Government regulations. Government regulations such as state and central laws are designed to protect or advance the interests of society and its individuals. Thus, researchers are required to take certain precautions. Papers, articles, workshop, seminar, conference, and symposium. Paper. A paper is defined as an essay or dissertation read at a seminar or published in a journal. It is either a result of research effort or an intellectual exercise. A research paper may entail all the steps of research such as literature survey, data collection and so on. It usually follows the journal's editorial policy. Conceptual papers are not based on data. It presents facts of research in a logical and lucid style. They can be analytical or argumentative. The paper usually requires that the sources are cited in a bibliography given at the end. The articles are usually informative in nature, which typically address the topic in a general scope as a means of introduction. They may appear in newspaper, magazine, consumer or industry publication. A research article is written by and for researchers for the purpose of making specific findings known to the scientific community at large. It includes a problem or question, method of research, data and conclusions. Research article is found exclusively in a peer-reviewed scientific or medical journal, such as Journal of Medical Research. A research article illustrates the outcome of scientific research with supporting clinical data. A research article could be used as a reference when writing a research paper. Meeting. A meeting is an assembly or coming together of people, whether it is a symposium, workshop, conference, or so. In a very remote sort of a way, All of them convey the same meaning, that is, people coming together for a purpose. Symposium. It is usually a formal meeting at which specialists deliver short addresses on a topic or on related topics and then answer the questions relating to these topics. It is especially one in which the participants form an audience and make presentations. Symposium is also defined as a collection of writings on a particular topic, as in a magazine. Colloquium. It is usually an academic meeting at which specialists deliver addresses on a topic or on related topics and then answer the questions relating to these topics. A colloquium is targeted to a well-educated but not specialized audience. Conference. A conference is a meeting of people who confer about a topic. It features keynotes and presentations delivered to all attendees, as well as multiple breakout sessions. Attendees expect to receive information about industry trends and developments. It can be an academic conference, a formal event where researchers present results, a business conference, organized to discuss business-related matters, or a parent-teacher conference, meeting with a child's teacher to discuss grades and school performance, a peace conference, a diplomatic meeting to end conflict, and so on. Webinars or web conferences. Webinars or web conferences are presentations that involve an audio and video component. The audio portion of the event is delivered via phone or over the internet, so that participants can listen via their computer speakers. The video portion of the event is delivered via the internet, giving participants a presentation to watch while listening to the instructor. Seminar. The word seminar is derived from the Latin word seminarium, meaning seed plot. It is a formal presentation by one or more experts to a small group of audience. It can be conducted on recurring or regular basis, monthly or even weekly. There is an invited speaker. An audience is much more technically versed or specific in nature. The motive behind the seminar system is to familiarize the students extensively with vital aspects of their study and also to allow them to interact with examples of practical problems that always occur during study or research work. A seminar is, thus, a form of academic instruction either at an academic institution or offered by a commercial or professional organization. Seminars focus on some particular subject in which everyone present is requested to actively participate. Colloquia and seminars both happen in an academic setting. Phenomena such as global warming and climate change, and nuclear power accidents are discussed but from the perspective of a scientist. However, well-educated audience is able to understand it. Teleseminars are delivered via a conference call over the telephone and or over the internet. Workshops tend to be smaller and more intense than seminars. This format involves students practicing their new skills during the event under the watchful eye of an instructor. Hands-on workshops typically involve participants doing work on a particular issue during the program. Rough plan or tools in place to address the challenge. Impact factor. The impact factor of an academic journal is a measure reflecting the average number of citations to recent articles published in the journal. It reflects the relative importance of a journal within its field. The journals with higher impact factors are deemed to be more important than those with lower ones. The H-index is an index that attempts to measure both the productivity and the impact of the published work of a scientist or a scholar. The G-index is like H-index. It has an averaged citations count. The I-10 index indicates the number of academic publications an author has written that have at least 10 citations from others. It was introduced in July 2011 by Google as part of their work on Google Scholar, a search engine dedicated to academic and related papers.